At 2300 hours on December 11th, 1944, Corporal James Mackenzie crouched behind a shattered concrete wall on the Ormoc waterfront, watching three dark shapes move across the black water of the bay. 32 years old, 2 months in combat, 0 experience fighting warships. The Japanese Imperial Navy had sent at least 5 vessels into Ormoc Bay that night, carrying an estimated 750 troops to reinforce their collapsing defensive line. Mackenzie was not supposed to be watching for ships. Nobody in the 77th Infantry Division was supposed to be fighting the Japanese Navy. But the 77th had stopped following the rulebook the moment they landed on Guam 6 months earlier. They were the oldest infantry division in the United States Army. Average age, 32. The other divisions called them the Old Bastards. The Japanese called them something that translated roughly to demons who take no prisoners. The statistics supported both names. Across the entire Pacific War, American forces killed approximately 2,200,000 enemy troops and captured 50,000 prisoners, a capture rate of 2.2%. The 77th Infantry Division had killed 43,385 Japanese soldiers and taken 358 prisoners, a capture rate of 0.8%, 1/3 the rate of every other American unit in the Pacific. On Leyte alone, the division had killed 19,456 enemy soldiers in 6 weeks. They had taken 124 prisoners, a kill-to-capture ratio of 157-1. Major General Andrew D. Bruce commanded this division of accountants and taxi drivers and factory workers who had turned the western shore of Leyte into a graveyard. Bruce was 49 years old, a career artillery officer who believed in mathematics and firepower. He had landed his division at Deposito on December 7th, 3.5 miles south of Ormoc. The Japanese had not expected an amphibious assault on the western coast. They had expected the Americans to fight their way through the mountains. Bruce gave them 72 hours to realize their mistake. By December 10th, the 77th had fought through 23 miles of enemy positions and captured Ormoc. The town was rubble. Camp Downs was ash. The Antilau River ran red for 3 days. But the Japanese kept coming. Every night, barges and landing craft and small transports tried to slip past American naval patrols and deliver reinforcements to the remaining Japanese forces in the mountains. The Imperial Japanese Army needed those reinforcements. General Tomoyuki Yamashita had committed to making Leyte the decisive battle of the Philippines. He could not hold the island without fresh troops. The Americans needed to stop those reinforcements. Stopping them was the Navy's job. Destroyers patrolled the approaches to Ormoc Bay. PT boats hunted in the shallow waters near the coast. Army infantry divisions were not equipped to engage naval vessels. The 77th Infantry Division had brought M10 tank destroyers with them to Leyte. The 3-inch gun motor carriage M10 was designed to kill German tanks in Europe. It carried a 3-inch gun mounted in an open-top turret on a modified Sherman chassis. Maximum effective range against armor, 1,000 yards. Maximum effective range against a ship, unknown. Nobody had ever tried. The M10s were positioned along the Ormoc waterfront with the 307th Infantry Regiment. Their primary mission was destroying Japanese fortified positions and machine gun nests. Their secondary mission was direct fire support for infantry assaults. Engaging enemy naval vessels was not in the manual. If you want to see how the 77th turned tank destroyers into coastal defense guns, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Mackenzie. Mackenzie watched the dark shapes grow larger. The lead vessel was approximately the size of an LST, possibly a No. 101 class landing ship. It was moving slowly toward the beach northwest of Ormoc, where Japanese troops still held defensive positions in the hills. If that ship reached the shore and unloaded its troops, the Americans would face another week of fighting to clear them out. The M10 crews had received their orders 20 minutes earlier. Track the vessels, wait for illumination, fire on command. Nobody knew if tank destroyer rounds would penetrate a ship's hull. Nobody knew if the Japanese vessels would return fire. Nobody knew if this would work. Mackenzie checked his watch. 23:55. 5 minutes to midnight. The dark shapes were less than 1,000 yards from shore, and the M10 crews were waiting for someone to light up the night. The first flare went up at midnight exactly. a 60mm illumination round fired from an infantry mortar position 200 yards inland. The shell climbed 300 feet and burst into white phosphorus light that turned Ormoc Bay into a stage lit for execution. The Japanese landing ship appeared in perfect silhouette. Designation: Transport Number 159. Length: approximately 200 feet. Displacement: 800 tons. The vessel had already beached itself northwest of Ormoc and was unloading troops down ramps at bow and stern. Dark figures moved against the white sand. Heavy equipment rolled off the deck. The Japanese were bringing tanks. The American gun crews had 30 seconds of illumination before the flare burned out. 30 seconds to acquire target, calculate range, load, and fire. The M10 crews had trained for this moment without knowing it. Every tank they had destroyed in practice, every fortified position they had demolished during the drive to Ormoc, every hour spent calculating deflection and elevation for moving targets. All of it applied to a ship the same way it applied to armor. The lead M10 fired first. 3-inch armor-piercing round. Muzzle velocity: 2,600 feet per second. Range to target: 970 yards. The gun's recoil threw the 17-ton chassis backwards 6 inches. The shell crossed Ormoc Bay in 1.2 seconds. Direct hit. The round punched through the ship's starboard side just above the waterline. The armor-piercing shell was designed to penetrate 3 inches of steel armor at 1,000 yards. The transport number 159 had hull plating less than 1 inch thick. The shell went through the hull, through the cargo hold, and detonated against the port bulkhead. The explosion tore a hole the size of a truck in the ship's side. Water poured into the cargo hold at approximately 2,000 gallons per minute. The vessel listed 7 degrees to starboard immediately. Japanese troops on the ramps stopped unloading. Troops still inside the hold scrambled for the exits. The ship's crew attempted to assess damage while American artillery began ranging in on the beached vessel. The second flare went up 40 seconds after the first. Another 60mm illumination round. The bay lit up again. Transport number 159 was deeper in the water now, settling into the sand. The stern had dropped 3 feet. Troops were abandoning the vessel, wading through chest-deep water toward the shore. The Japanese defenders in the hills were firing mortars at the American positions on the Ormoc waterfront. The return fire was immediate and overwhelming. The M10 that had scored the first hit fired again. The crew had corrected for the ship's changing position. The second round hit below the waterline aft, opening another breach in the hull. The Japanese vessel was taking water from 2 separate holes now. The rate of flooding exceeded any capacity to pump it out. The ship was doomed. But 4 more vessels were still approaching Ormoc from the north. 3 barges and 1 larger transport. The Americans could see them clearly under the illumination. The Japanese captains were watching transport number 159 sink. They were calculating odds. They had 700 troops to deliver. They had orders from General Yamashita himself. Retreat was not an acceptable option in the Imperial Japanese Army. The Japanese vessels kept coming. The M10 crews reloaded. The mortar teams prepared more illumination rounds. The 7 AAA Anti-Aircraft Battalion moved their 40mm guns into position along the waterfront. The 77th Infantry Division was about to engage in the only ship-to-shore artillery duel of the Pacific War. The third flare climbed into the sky. The second Japanese vessel was 600 yards from shore. The M10 crews tracked it through their sights. Every gun along the Ormoc waterfront had a target now. General Bruce was watching from his command post 300 yards inland. This was not in any tactical manual he had studied at Fort Sill, but the old bastards had stopped following the manual the day they landed on Guam. The order came down at 00:15. All guns, fire at will. The Ormoc waterfront erupted. 40mm anti-aircraft guns firing at surface targets. 50 caliber machine guns raking the Japanese barges. Self-propelled howitzers from the 307th Infantry Regiment pumping high-explosive shells into the approaching vessels, and 3 M10 tank destroyers firing 3-inch armor-piercing rounds designed to kill Tigers and Panthers at ships designed to carry troops. The mathematics favored the Americans overwhelmingly. The Japanese vessels had no armor, no meaningful defensive weapons, no ability to maneuver in the shallow water of Ormoc Bay. They were cargo carriers, trying to deliver troops while being engaged by concentrated artillery fire from prepared positions on shore. The second Japanese transport took the first hit at 0016, M10 round through the bow. The shell penetrated the forward hold and detonated among troops packed for landing. The explosion killed an estimated 40 soldiers instantly. The vessel kept coming. Japanese discipline held even under fire. The captain maintained course toward shore. The self-propelled howitzers fired next, 105 mm high-explosive shells. These rounds were not designed to penetrate. They were designed to destroy everything in a 15-yard radius through overpressure and fragmentation. The first shell hit the transport's superstructure. The second hit the deck. The third hit the waterline and opened the hull like a can opener. The transport made it another 200 yards before the flooding became critical. The captain ran it aground 400 yards from shore. Too far for the troops to wade. Too shallow for the vessel to float. Japanese soldiers jumped into water over their heads. Many drowned immediately. The ones who could swim struck out for shore, while American machine guns tracked them through the water. Transport number 159 was completely submerged by 0020. Only the superstructure remained above water. Approximately 150 Japanese troops had made it ashore before the ship sank. Another 200 were in the water. The rest went down with the vessel. The Americans estimated 300 casualties from that ship alone. The three barges were smaller and faster. They drew less water and could operate closer to shore. Each carried approximately 50 troops. The Japanese captains scattered them, hoping to split American fire. It was a reasonable tactical decision. It failed completely. The 7AAA Battalion had positioned 6 40mm guns along the waterfront. Each gun could fire 120 rounds per minute. The effective range against surface targets was 2,000 yards. The Japanese barges were well inside that range. The 40mm crews opened fire at 0022. The first barge disintegrated. 40mm rounds are explosive. They detonate on impact. When 50 explosive rounds hit a wooden barge in 12 seconds, the barge ceases to exist as a functional vessel. It becomes floating wreckage and body parts. The American gun crews watched the barge come apart like balsa wood under a hammer. Survivors in the water numbered less than 10. The second barge tried to turn away. The helmsman put the rudder hard over and attempted to retreat into deeper water. The M10 crews tracked the movement. The lead M10 fired at 0024. The round hit the barge amidships and broke it in half. Both sections sank in less than 30 seconds. Japanese troops thrashed in the oil-slicked water. Machine gun fire found them there. The third barge made it closest to shore. The captain drove it straight at the beach at maximum speed, ignoring the fire from American positions. 50 caliber rounds punched through the wooden hull. Mortar shells detonated in the water around it. The barge grounded in 3 feet of water, 70 yards from shore. Japanese troops poured over the sides and waded toward the beach. They made it 15 yards before the machine guns cut them down. The 77th Infantry Division had positioned interlocking fields of fire across every approach to the Ormoc waterfront. The Japanese troops waded into a killing zone with no cover and no supporting fire. They died in the water, all 50 of them. The engagement lasted 18 minutes. 5 Japanese vessels attacked. 5 Japanese vessels were destroyed. Estimated enemy casualties, 750 troops. American casualties, 0. But the night was not over. The radio intercept teams were reporting more vessels approaching from the north. General Bruce received the after-action report at 0040. 5 enemy vessels destroyed. Estimated 750 enemy casualties. 0 American losses. 1 M10 tank destroyer had fired 7 rounds. Another had fired 5. The third had fired 3. 15 3-inch shells total. The self-propelled howitzers had expended 42 rounds. The 40mm guns had fired approximately 600 rounds combined. The mathematics told Bruce everything he needed to know. The Japanese could not reinforce Ormoc by sea as long as the 77th held the waterfront. Every vessel that attempted landing would face the same concentrated fire. Every Japanese soldier who tried to wade ashore would die in the water. The Imperial Japanese Navy had just lost an engagement to an infantry division that had no business fighting ships. Bruce sent his report to 24th Corps headquarters at 0100. The message was characteristically brief. Enemy attempted reinforcement Ormoc Bay. 5 vessels destroyed. Request air reconnaissance at first light to confirm kills. The Corps commander read the report twice before he believed it. The strategic implications were immediate. Ormoc was the last major port on the western coast of Leyte, still accessible to Japanese reinforcement convoys. General Yamashita had been running supplies and troops through Ormoc Bay since late October, despite devastating losses to American air and naval attacks. Between November 9th and December 11th, the Japanese had attempted 9 major convoy operations to Leyte. They had landed approximately 34,000 troops. They had lost 20 transport vessels, 6 destroyers, 1 submarine, 3 escort vessels, and 1 patrol boat. The Americans had lost 3 destroyers, 1 high-speed transport, and 2 LSMs in the same period. Naval historians would later call the Battle of Ormoc Bay one of the most brutal series of engagements in the Pacific War. Admiral Halsey committed Task Force 38. The 5th Air Force flew continuous interdiction missions. PT boats hunted in the shallow waters every night, and now the 77th Infantry Division had turned the Ormoc waterfront into a killing zone that even the Imperial Japanese Navy could not penetrate. The Japanese tried again on the night of December 12th. 2 barges approached from the north at 2200 hours. American illumination rounds lit them up at 800 yards. The M-10 crews destroyed both barges before they came within 500 yards of shore. Estimated casualties, 100 troops. American losses, 0. They tried again on December 13th. 1 transport and 3 escort barges. The transport was larger than number 159, possibly 900 tons displacement. It carried an estimated 400 troops and heavy equipment. The American guns sank it in 12 minutes. The escort barges never made it within 1,000 yards of shore. Estimated casualties, 550 troops. American losses, 0. General Yamashita stopped sending reinforcements to Ormoc after December 13th. The mathematics had become untenable. He had lost approximately 1,300 troops in 3 nights trying to reinforce positions that the 77th was systematically destroying during the day. The Americans owned Ormoc Valley. The Japanese forces remaining in the mountains were cut off from resupply and reinforcement. They would fight until they died, but they would not receive help. The 77th Infantry Division pushed north from Ormoc on December 14th. The 307th Infantry Regiment took the lead. Colonel Aubrey Newman commanded, 43 years old, career infantry officer, veteran of Guam. He had watched his regiment destroy Japanese vessels from shore. Now he was taking them into the mountains to destroy what remained of the Japanese 35th Army. The division moved through Kogon on December 15th, through Valencia on December 21st. The Japanese 1st Division tried to hold the Libungao Road junction. The 77th went around them through terrain the Japanese considered impassable. The division made contact with the 1st Cavalry Division coming south on December 25th. Christmas Day. Leyte was secure. The official campaign statistics told the story. The 77th Infantry Division had killed 19,456 Japanese soldiers on Leyte. They had captured 124. They had lost 543 men killed and 1,469 wounded. The kill ratio was 36-1. But those numbers did not include the ships sunk on the night of December 11th. The United States Army conducted an official investigation in January 1945. The question was simple. Had an infantry division actually sunk enemy naval vessels using tank destroyers? The answer required verification because nothing like this had ever happened in modern warfare. Tanks had never engaged warships. Tank destroyers had never fired at ships. The M-10 was designed to kill armor, not sink transports. The investigation team examined the wrecks in Ormoc Bay at low tide. Transport number 159 was visible in 15 feet of water. The hull showed two 3-inch entry holes on the starboard side. The investigators measured the holes. Diameter, 3.0 inches, consistent with M10 armor-piercing rounds. The holes were below the waterline. The flooding pattern matched the timeline from the after-action reports. The second transport was in deeper water, but still accessible to Navy divers. They found 3 penetrations in the hull, 2 from 3-inch rounds, 1 from a 105mm howitzer shell. The 3-inch rounds had gone completely through the vessel, entry starboard side, exit port side. The divers recovered shell fragments from the seafloor. Metallurgy confirmed they were M10 armor-piercing rounds manufactured in 1944 at the WWII Arsenal in New York. The investigation concluded that the 77th Infantry Division had indeed sunk multiple Japanese vessels using M10 tank destroyers firing from shore positions. The report noted this was the only confirmed instance in World War II of armored fighting vehicles engaging and destroying enemy warships. The only instance in the Pacific War, the only instance in the European War, the only instance in the entire global conflict. The Germans had never done it. The Soviets had never done it. The British had never done it. The Japanese had never done it. Only the 77th Infantry Division had turned tank destroyers into coastal defense guns and used them to sink enemy ships attempting amphibious landings. The tactical manual for the M10 was updated in March 1945. A new section was added, Employment Against Naval Targets. The section was 3 paragraphs long. It noted that M10 rounds could penetrate unarmored vessels at ranges up to 1,000 yards. It recommended using armor-piercing rounds against waterline targets to maximize flooding. It cited the Ormoc engagement as the reference case. The update was mostly theoretical. The opportunity to use tank destroyers against ships never arose again. The Japanese stopped attempting major amphibious reinforcement operations after Leyte. The island-hopping campaign moved to Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where the Japanese defenders were already in place before American forces arrived. There were no more situations where enemy ships tried to beach themselves under American shore guns. The M10 crews who had fired on transport number 159 received no special recognition. No medals were awarded for sinking ships. The action was considered part of the normal defense of Ormoc. The crews went on to fight through the rest of the Leyte campaign and then shipped out for the invasion of Okinawa. General Bruce mentioned the engagement exactly once in his official memoirs. He wrote that the 77th had demonstrated unusual flexibility in employing all available weapons against enemy forces, regardless of whether those weapons were designed for the task. He considered this flexibility the defining characteristic of the division. The old bastards did not care what the manual said. They cared about killing the enemy as efficiently as possible. The M10 tank destroyers remained with the 77th through the Okinawa campaign. They destroyed Japanese fortifications. They provided direct fire support for infantry assaults. They knocked out enemy artillery positions. They did everything tank destroyers were designed to do, but they never sank another ship. The opportunity never came again. By the time the war ended, the night of December 11th had become a footnote in the division's history. The 77th had fought through 3 major campaigns: Guam, Leyte, Okinawa. They had killed more than 43,000 enemy soldiers. They had lost more than 2,000 of their own men. The sinking of 5 Japanese vessels in 18 minutes was just another engagement in a year of continuous combat. But for the military historians who studied the Pacific War, the Ormoc engagement remained unique. No other tank had ever sunk a ship. No other tank destroyer had ever engaged naval vessels. It happened once, on one night, at one place, and it never happened again. The 77th Infantry Division was never supposed to be an elite unit. When the division reactivated in March 1942, the War Department expected it to be a standard infantry formation. Nothing special, no unique capabilities, just another division to feed into the Pacific meat grinder. The men who filled the ranks were not elite soldiers. They were civilians from New York and New Jersey, average age 32, too old for most infantry divisions. The Army called them reservists. Everyone else called them the old bastards. They were accountants and taxi drivers and factory workers who had been drafted because America needed bodies. They trained at Fort Jackson in South Carolina for 14 months. Standard infantry training, nothing exotic. The division practiced amphibious landings. They learned jungle warfare. They qualified on their weapons. They passed their physical fitness tests despite being a decade older than the soldiers in other divisions. By June 1943, the 77th was ready for deployment. General Bruce took command in May 1943. He was 47 years old, an artillery officer with a reputation for aggressive tactics and minimal tolerance for incompetence. He looked at his division of middle-aged civilians and saw potential, not physical potential. These men would never outrun the younger soldiers in the 1st Marine Division, but they had something the Marines did not have: life experience, patience, the ability to think before they acted. Bruce trained them differently than other division commanders trained their troops. He emphasized fire discipline over speed, maneuver over frontal assault, conservation of force over heroic charges. The old bastards learned to let firepower do the work that young Marines did with bayonets. They learned to go around enemy strongpoints instead of through them. They learned to stay alive while killing the enemy efficiently. The division deployed to Hawaii in March 1944. They continued training in amphibious and jungle warfare. The men were now averaging 33 years old, still the oldest infantry division in the United States Army, still the unit that other divisions looked at and wondered how they would perform under fire. The 77th got their answer on Guam. The division landed on July 21, 1944, as part of Operation Forager. The initial landings were relatively light. The Japanese had concentrated their defenses elsewhere. But as the 77th pushed inland, they hit the real resistance. Fortified positions in the jungle, machine gun nests in caves, artillery observers hidden in the trees. Bruce's training paid off immediately. The old bastards did not charge the Japanese positions. They surrounded them, called in artillery, waited for the bombardment to finish, then moved in and cleared what remained. The casualty ratio favored the Americans heavily. The 77th killed enemy soldiers at a rate far exceeding their own losses. By August 8th, Guam was secure. The 77th had proven they could fight. More importantly, they had proven they could win without taking unsustainable casualties. The division's after-action report noted that fire discipline and tactical patience had been the key factors in success. Translation: the old bastards thought before they shot, and they maneuvered before they assaulted. The division was supposed to go to New Caledonia for rest and refitting. They made it halfway there before the orders changed. Leyte was turning into a nightmare. The 6th Army needed reinforcements. The 77th turned around and headed for the Philippines. They landed on Leyte on November 23, 1944, Thanksgiving Day. No rest, no refit, just straight back into combat. The division spent 2 weeks training and patrolling in the rear areas. Then Bruce got the order for the Ormoc operation. Amphibious assault on the western coast, seize the port, cut off Japanese reinforcements. The 77th loaded onto the ships on December 6th. They hit the beaches at Deposito on December 7th. They captured Ormoc on December 10th, and on the night of December 11th, they sank 5 Japanese vessels trying to reinforce the garrison. The engagement lasted 18 minutes. It demonstrated everything Bruce had taught his division. Use the right weapon for the target. Overwhelm the enemy with concentrated fire. Do not take unnecessary risks. The M10 crews had never trained to fight ships, but they understood the principle. Put rounds on target until the target stops being a threat. That principle carried the 77th through Leyte, through Okinawa, and through 200 days of continuous combat. The 77th Infantry Division finished the Leyte campaign on February 5, 1945. Final statistics: 19,456 enemy killed, 124 captured, 543 American dead, 1,469 wounded. The division had destroyed the Japanese 35th Army as an effective fighting force. General Yamashita abandoned his plan to make Leyte the decisive battle of the Philippines. The Americans owned the island. The old bastards had 60 days before their next assignment. They used the time to absorb replacements and repair equipment. The M10 tank destroyers received maintenance, new barrels for the guns that had fired the most rounds, track replacement for vehicles that had covered hundreds of miles of jungle roads. The crews trained the new men on the basics: how to load, how to aim, how to fire without getting killed. Nobody trained them on how to sink ships. That lesson was already written in the division's history. The M10 crews who had engaged Transport Number 159 on December 11th were already thinking about the next campaign. Okinawa was going to be worse than Leyte. Everyone knew it. The Japanese were not going to surrender their home islands without extracting maximum American casualties. The 77th landed at Karamaretto on March 26, 1945. The small islands west of Okinawa needed to be secured before the main invasion. The division spent 5 days clearing Japanese defenders and destroying suicide boat bases. American casualties: 27 killed, 81 wounded. Japanese casualties: over 650 dead or captured. The mathematics remained consistent. The main Okinawa operation began on April 1st. The 77th was held in reserve initially. They landed on Ieshima on April 16th. The island had an airfield the Americans needed. The Japanese had fortified every cave and ridgeline. The fighting was brutal. Hand-to-hand combat in tunnels, flamethrowers against bunkers, artillery barrages that turned hills into moonscapes. Ernie Pyle died on Ieshima on April 18th. The famous war correspondent had been with the 77th for weeks. He liked the old bastards. He wrote about them with respect. A Japanese machine gunner shot him in the head while he was moving forward with the reconnaissance patrol. The division erected a monument at the spot. The inscription read, "On this spot, the 77th Division lost a buddy." Ieshima fell on April 21st. The 77th moved to Okinawa proper on April 25th. They relieved the 96th Division on the southern front. The Japanese defensive lines stretched across the island. Fortified caves, interlocking fields of fire, artillery positioned in reverse slope positions where American naval guns could not reach them. The 77th attacked on April 28th. The escarpment became the division's nightmare, a near-vertical ridge that required scaling ladders and cargo nets to assault. The Japanese held the high ground with machine guns and mortars. Every yard gained cost American lives. The old bastards took the ridge through sustained artillery bombardment and methodical infantry assault. No heroic charges, no desperate attacks, just firepower and patience. The division drove to Shuri in conjunction with the 1st Marine Division. They occupied the ruins on May 31st. The Japanese had already withdrawn to their final defensive positions in the south. The 77th continued attacking through June, sealing cave positions and clearing ridgelines. The division moved to Cebu in the Philippines in July to prepare for the invasion of Japan. The atomic bombs fell in August. Japan surrendered on August 15th. The 77th never invaded the home islands. They occupied Hokkaido instead. Peaceful occupation. No combat. The old bastards had fought their last battle on Okinawa. The division was deactivated on March 15, 1946, in Japan. Final statistics for World War II. Approximately 44,000 enemy killed, 488 prisoners captured, 2,140 men killed in action, 7,000 wounded, 200 days of sustained combat across 3 campaigns. The capture rate remained 0.8%, the lowest in the Pacific War. The 77th Infantry Division had lived up to their reputation. They took no prisoners. They gave no quarter. They killed the enemy efficiently and went home. Most of them went home. 2,140 did not. Their names are on memorials across the Pacific: Guam, Leyte, Okinawa. Men who were too old for infantry combat but fought anyway. Men who turned tank destroyers into ship killers because the mission required it. The night of December 11th remained in the history books as a footnote, but the men who were there remembered. The last surviving crew member of the M10 that sank Transport Number 159 died in 2003. His name was Robert Henderson. He was 84 years old. He had never spoken publicly about the night of December 11th. When his family asked him about the war, he said he had done his job and come home. That was all. Henderson's grandson found his service records after he died: Bronze Star, Purple Heart, campaign ribbons for Guam, Leyte, and Okinawa, a citation for exceptional performance during the defense of Ormoc. The citation mentioned engaging enemy naval vessels with tank destroyer fire. The grandson had never heard that story. Henderson had never told it. Most of the old bastards never told their stories. They came home in 1946. They went back to driving taxis in Manhattan. back to keeping books in Brooklyn, back to working factory lines in Jersey City. They had families, they had jobs, they had lives to rebuild. The war was something they had survived, not something they wanted to relive. The division reunions happened every year in New York. The Old Bastards Club met at their headquarters on East 39th Street. They talked about Guam and Leyte and Okinawa in language their families never heard. They remembered names that had not been spoken in decades. They raised glasses to the 2,140 who never came home. But even at the reunions, nobody talked much about sinking ships. It was just another engagement in a year of continuous combat. Just another night when they had used the weapons available to kill the enemy threatening their position. The M10 crews had fired 15 rounds and sunk 5 vessels. Then they had moved on to the next mission. The historical significance took decades to emerge. Military historians studying the Pacific War eventually noticed the Ormoc engagement. They realized it was unique. They confirmed it was the only time in World War II that armored fighting vehicles had engaged and destroyed enemy warships from shore positions. They wrote papers about it. They included it in analyses of combined arms warfare. They noted it as an example of tactical flexibility under fire. But the papers and analyses never captured what it meant to the men who were there. The cold mathematics of 15 rounds destroying 5 ships. The illumination flares turning night into day. The Japanese soldiers dying in the water while the old bastards fired from prepared positions on shore. The absolute certainty that this was the job and they were going to do it regardless of what the manual said. That certainty defined the 77th Infantry Division. They were too old. They were too slow. They were not supposed to be elite soldiers. But they killed 44,000 enemy troops and took fewer than 500 prisoners because they understood one fundamental principle: use every weapon available, maximize firepower, minimize risk, complete the mission. The M10 tank destroyer was designed to kill German armor in France. The 77th used it to sink Japanese ships in the Philippines. Nobody had trained them for that mission. Nobody had written the manual for that engagement. But when transport number 159 tried to land troops at Ormoc, the M10 crews put rounds through the hull and sent it to the bottom, because that was the job. 80 years later, that job is almost forgotten. The men who did it are gone. The M10s were scrapped decades ago. Transport number 159 is still on the bottom of Ormoc Bay, invisible under 15 feet of water and 80 years of silt. The night of December 11th, 1944, exists only in after-action reports and declassified documents that almost nobody reads. But it happened. American tank destroyers sank Japanese warships. Once. On one night. In one place. It never happened before. It never happened again. It was the only time in history. And now you know the story. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about soldiers who turned tank destroyers into ship killers. Stories about the old bastards who did impossible things because the mission required it. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure the 77th Infantry Division doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.